President and Board of Trustees, roll call, please.
Trustee O'Rourke.
Here.
Trustee Peck.
Here.
Trustee Wajowski. Trustee Benucci.
Here.
Trustee Lamb. Mayor Collins.
Here. If we could rise for the pledge, and we have the honor of having Plainfield Cub Scout Pack 58 is going to present the colors and lead us in the pledge.
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you very much, Pack 58. You did a wonderful job, and you left the ceiling tile in place.
Presidential comments.
I just have a couple real quick ones, I think. The obvious one is be careful out there when you're traveling because the roads are slick. We've been taking evasive action with the salt since about 4 o'clock, so we're hoping that that'll help us out. And then the only other one I have is to recognize the chief. Last Friday, Trustee Benucci and I went to Kendall County, and Chief Kano was presented with the president of the Kendall County Chiefs of Police. He is now the president, so congratulations to the chief. And that's all I have.
Trustees' comments. There are no trustee comments. This would be the time for public comments. If there are no public comments, then we'll proceed with the business meeting. We're seeking a motion to amend the agenda to remove items number 7, the kayak concession agreement for Riverfront Park.
That's my motion.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to amend the agenda. Trustee O'Rourke,
Yes.
Trustee Peck,
Yes.
Trustee Benucci,
Yes.
Trustee Lamb.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. We're seeking a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the amended agenda. Trustee O'Rourke,
Yes.
Trustee Peck,
Yes.
Trustee Benucci,
Yes.
Trustee Lamb. Thank you. That motion carries. We're seeking a motion to approve the consent agenda to include minutes of the board meeting held on December 19th and bills paid and bills payable reports for January 9th.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve items A and B under the consent agenda. Trustee O'Rourke,
Yes.
Trustee Peck,
Yes.
Trustee Benucci,
Yes.
Trustee Lamb.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is PACE Intergovernmental Agreement. We're seeking board consideration of a motion to execute the intergovernmental agreement with PACE to grant a non-exclusive license for village-owned property for the purpose of constructing and operating a park and ride facility.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Hearing none,
I'm sorry, I do have some comments or questions, I guess. I guess I just wanted first by saying that obviously this is I believe this is a good opportunity for the village and our residents, and I'm very much in support of the agreement. I guess my comments come more into the process of the review or how this was, I guess, brought forward. So I think initially I had found out about it when it was part of a topic of another plan, and it was kind of shown off on the off side of the plan, and kind of questioned what the other part of that map was showing, and then that's kind of how it started. So I understand we're going to be spending millions of dollars on this, and obviously it's a reimbursement stuff, but I just think as a board maybe we could in the future possibly when bigger items like this come up, make it a point to maybe have more discussion as opposed to less. I don't know how the other board members feel about it, if they feel like they've been vetted through it and all, but there's a number of things, I guess, maybe it's just my personality that I like to talk about things and have the data and answer the questions, and then also just, I think it helps the residents understand, that we're engaged and we are questioning and we are trying to do the right things for them. So I guess based upon that, I know it's let me see, there's, I guess the first question that comes to my mind, and again, really it's more discussion at this point, was, how do we pay for this? I don't know if I know it's reimbursed, but at some point we have to write the checks and.
Right. What happens is there are 3 different points during the design of this project that we would be paying the design firm, and that those would be approved by PACE for payment. We would then pay the contractor for doing the work, and then PACE would reimburse us back within 30 days. And the same thing with construction is the contractor would do a standard draw request at certain key points during construction. Those would go to us for review, and then as well to PACE for review. PACE would approve the payment. We would then pay the contractor, and then PACE would pay us.
Okay, and then I guess from an accounting or a budgeting standpoint do we have the money? Are we borrowing the money? Is it this budget year? Is it next budget year?
It will hit mostly into next budget year. There could be some budget requests that come in this year that will require a budget amendment, because we don't have that yet. And more than likely, once we approve this agreement tonight, what happens then next is PACE has to actually approve the agreement. After PACE approves the agreement, then we can go to PACE with the proposal for engineering services. PACE will approve that, and then we can move forward from there. And once we know what those timelines are, that will trigger whether or not we need to make a budget amendment. But again, whatever budget amendment we would request would very well be offset by the revenue that would be coming in against that. That being said, looking at the amount of work that's taking place, more than likely the first draw probably won't take place until after May, so there probably isn't going to be a budget amendment for this fiscal year, but rather it'll be tied into next fiscal year's projects.
So will this affect what part of the budget? Capital? Do we
It'll be a
have funds,
pass
or-
through. It'll be a pass through into capital.
Okay.
Mhm.
And to speak to your cash flow question, there's over $8 million in the capital funds fund balance, so there's not a huge concern for cash flows for the village as far as fronting that $1 million and getting paid subsequently after. At this point, staff is comfortable with that as well.
So we'll be funding it through existing balances, and we won't
Through
be
the
borrowing any
capital
money.
fund, correct.
Perfect. And then, I know in the past, there was some discussion about adding additional lines, and I think that was being restricted by PACE not being able to get additional buses at this time. So obviously, I think the size and the scope of this, the plan is at some point in the future, I would hope that they're planning on adding more lines to fill this parking lot. Do we know anything more about buses? I guess where I'm going is I'd hate to have us build it and them reimburse us and then not have it utilized.
Yeah, the current process and conversation that PACE shared with us when they gave this final agreement is that they'd actually like to expedite the process for getting a bus garage there, because it appears as though they are in line to be able to have the additional buses that they would be looking to do. But again, that conversation will take place after this all gets going. So they seem pretty bullish on moving forward with the project, not just to service the 755 and 855, but other potential lines.
Have they shared with us what their long-range plan is? In other words, maybe in 1, 2, 3 more lines, or?
No, not yet.
And then, I guess from a resident's perspective, is there gonna be a cost to park in this lot, you know?
There's no charge there's no charge anticipated in the agreement. There's no plan at this point that this would be a for-charge lot. That is one of the things that we discussed and said that if it comes to being an issue later on that they need to, or we need to make that a consideration, that would be something we'd have to bring back to both of our boards for consideration. But generally speaking, they don't like for-pay lots.
Okay, so, and I know it's gonna be done, I believe, if I read it, in 2 different phases, so obviously we're hoping that it's a huge success and it gets very popular. We're kinda kicking in the land value for this project, or doing the improvement part of it, correct?
Correct. Mhm.
So by us creating the land value or adding the land into this equation, is there gonna be any priority for village residents if parking becomes?
We didn't broach that subject, but I'd be happy to go back with them on that as a request.
Thank you. And then,
The tenor and direction that we took was that when we purchased the land, we wanted it to be used for a transit lot. And so for us, this made a perfect sense and a great synergy for both that agency and for our residents. So we saw that. But that's a good question you bring up, and I'll follow up with that.
last question, sorry, is the legal description is in there, but do you know what the size of the property acre-wise is?
In total, we purchased 58 acres. What's being considered as part of this is just around 10 acres. I'm going to look to Derek and Alan to tie me down exactly on that. And that's why in the memo, that the cover memo, we talked that what you're signing and approving today is in its substantive form. We expect that those exhibits will probably, once we know what the final design looks like and some other tweaking along the way, those prices, those exhibits will probably get changed out, and then we'll know for certain what that is. But right now, we're looking at about 10 acres.
And I guess if I'm looking at this right, knowing how everybody's budgets are strained, for this to be happening in Plainfield it's a big deal, I believe, correct?
This is a very big deal. This has been an ongoing project. We, frankly, we talked to Pace about this, 2 or 3 years ago as a possibility, and they weren't sure that they were interested in this site, and actually explored a cadre of other locations. Last February, they told us that they were optimistic they would have something done here by the end of the year, and as you know, as you pointed out, the storyline changed a little bit over the summer, and we were happy to be able to call them our home and our host. So, yeah,
Well,
this is a
kudos
great
to you
project.
and all the staff involved.
Well,
Nice job.
thanks, Ed. Thank you very much.
I have a couple of minor questions. I think the overall agreement is excellent. We're getting our design reimbursed. Does that include village staff, not just our subcontractors, not Baxter and Woodman, but also Randy and Scott and whoever else might be involved? Are we getting that money back, or are we throwing that in also?
Yeah, the majority of the work will occur through Baxter and Woodman, so they'll do the bulk of it. You know, we provide project management and partnerships with other developers on a regular basis, and I won't say donate our staff time, but we believe it's part of the service to the village to advance a project, and especially with this being an intergovernmental agreement and that cooperation, the cost for engineering would be Baxter and Woodman's and not our own staff costs. But we believe once it gets started, at that time will be minimal that we have to dedicate towards that.
Okay, thanks. The other question has to do with depreciation. If we terminate this within 20 years, they want straight line depreciation from us. Does that come back in cash, or just what's all that about? I've never seen that before.
There's
in
a
an agreement.
chart in the back.
Yeah, this was the mutual destruction clauses, and forgive me, but this was born out of me going through my divorce, and my attorney called it the mutual destruction clause. I know Tracy's hitting her head, but generally speaking, the issue is that when you start off a relationship, everybody's generally usually very happy about it. However, you have to truly genuinely think about what will happen if the relationship sours. And so the discussion is that, again, this is a 40-year agreement, but if for some reason in the first 20 years there was interest in either the village or Pace in canceling the agreement, that there should be that there are costs that are incurred, and so for Pace it is the cost of the construction. So you would just straight line the 5.8 million divided over 20 years, multiplied by ever many years are left in that 20-year span, and the village would have to remunerate PACE for that. Likewise, if there's any demolition costs that we would incur within those 20 years to remove it so that we could use the property for some other reason, that and PACE walked away from the agreement, that there would be payment back to us using that same depreciation schedule.
Again, clarify for me exactly how you'd handle the depreciation. How much would be involved if we're terminated in the first year? You said they were throwing in the construction costs and that.
Well, the
then I thought
construction,
it was
yeah.
pretty cool. Then you say, oh, well, we're going to demolish it. They're ending up with nothing. So what is the cost of that?
Yeah, that was the hard part, because determining what those demolition costs would be, and we might not want to demolish everything. So that was the other part too.
Nothing else.
So we that's actually one of the open-ended parts, and it's a big risk for them. That's what we were looking at, is if we wanted to return it back to farmland, it'd be a very expensive proposition for them.
I just,
So
I'm sure it wasn't expensive for us. They're not too expensive.
Yeah.
There's no reason to try to terminate it in the next 20 years.
Yeah, neither party wants to terminate it. So, but the idea is that you want to have some type of protection on the back end, just in case
Well,
you.
it's
Yeah.
equitable. I couldn't figure out how it was equitable. You explained some more
Yeah.
to me. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I might have missed some of that. It's unclear to me. So just for clarity, so if for something happens and PACE decides to walk away in 10 years,
Yes.
they
Then-
would owe us money or we would owe them money?
If PACE walked away in 10 years, they would owe us 50% of the demolition costs.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll add to the conversation and expound a little bit. I was all ready to vote and we were ready to go, but I actually feel that I'd like to add, and, Trustee O'Rourke is right. There are some things that I do, warrant, additional discussion, especially something of this nature. And this isn't just necessarily a PACE station, okay? We're looking at something that's going to affect businesses and homeowners here. There's an economic impact here. Now, if you picture, obviously, we're going to be able to harness this facility, have residents from outside of Plainfield Park and use these services. That also opens opportunities then for small business owners, restaurants, dry cleaners, what have you, to service these people before and after work, before they get on the bus, off the bus. So there's a lot more to this than just simply helping to reduce traffic, which is also a positive. I see no negatives in this proposal right now. I do appreciate all the work staff has done, and I have not received any negative feedback from the community at all. I think the community's already accepted this was going to be some sort of a transportation facility. It's not going to be a star line. I have no problem with this. This is a huge step in the right direction, and a big feather in the hat for Plainfield. Thank you very much.
Well, Trustee Peck, you're exactly right. When this was first being discussed with the Star Line, the idea to have supporting businesses around it was exactly what the plan was, as you remember from doing the central plan and all the other committees from several years ago. So there's a lot of opportunity. Just the fact that people are in town, they may stop on the way home and shop or use a restaurant or whatever. So, and it's great for us because we're not going to get a train, but if it helps alleviate the opportunity for people to spend less time in their cars and trying to get back and forth. And if Trustee Rassich was here, former Trustee Rassich, he'd be telling you how he rides the bus for $2. So, it's all good. So it's a great project, and we're glad to see this moving along. Thank you.
One last point of clarification. Alan, if we can look over the next 10 years on our MFT funds and the additional motor fuel sales tax that's generated once this is in operation, I think that'd be an interesting, number to look at and see how it actually does affect. You're going to have a lot of people parking here. How many are going to be refueling their cars again before and after work? So that's just another small point, but
Sure.
thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other comments or questions? Now, the motion was made and seconded to execute an intergovernmental agreement with PACE to grant a non-exclusive license for village-owned property for the purpose of constructing and operating a park and ride facility. Trustee O'Rourke.
Yes.
Trustee Peck.
Yes.
Trustee Benucci.
Yes.
Trustee Land.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 15233 South Joliet Road. We're seeking board consideration of a motion to adopt ordinance number 3291, granting approval of the requested map amendment rezoning of the subject properties from R1 and B1 to BT.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Are there any comments or questions?
I'm sorry, I have a question. My notes might be out of order, so which project are we on?
number 4.
Joliet Road.
I'm good, thank you.
There are no comments or questions. The motion was made and seconded to adopt ordinance number 3291, granting approval of the requested map amendment rezoning of the subject property at 15233 South Joliet Road from R1 and B1 to BT. Trustee O'Rourke?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 25530 West Pastoral Drive. We're seeking board consideration of a motion to adopt ordinance number 3292, granting approval of a variance to permit a brick paver retaining wall and concrete surround of an in-ground swimming pool up to 18 inches into the side yard for the property located at 25530 West Pastoral Drive.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, I'll proceed with the roll. Trustee O'Rourke?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 12549 South Wingstem Street. We're seeking board consideration of a motion to adopt the findings of fact of the Zoning Board of Appeals as the findings of fact of the Board of Trustees, and furthermore, to direct the village attorney to prepare an ordinance granting approval of a variance to permit a fence up to 30 feet into the corner side yard, but no less than 10 feet from the edge of the sidewalk along Cordelia Street for the property located at 12549 South Wingstem Street.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Are there any comments or questions?
Just
Go ahead.
Just one comment. I think I'd like to commend the applicant and the Plan Commission for adjusting the original proposal. Instead of being 1 foot from the sidewalk, it's now 10 feet. I think that shows good judgment on everybody's part, and I think it's a nice move. So thank them for us.
I guess my comment or question is, I guess I would just like to reiterate my thoughts on the variances for the corners and the fences. I think we put an undue onus on our residents by asking them to come in and do this rather than establishing just an ordinance that would allow it, as opposed to coming in for a special variance request. In other words, I know we've talked about it and the board wasn't favorable, but I just thought I would use this opportunity to express my desire that it would be more favorable, I think, because it wouldn't allow or wouldn't make residents come in. And I think there's a number of residents that still don't even understand the variance process, that are burdened without being able to utilize the side yard of their corner lot because they don't even know that they can do it. And then my last comment there is, I think a big reason we started the ordinance was for line of sight. And I think what's happened sometimes is when we allow variances like this, which I am supportive of, I think what happens is now sometimes you move the fence out and you move the landscaping as well. And sometimes the landscaping can be a barrier just as almost sometimes even more than maybe a fence. So I don't know if when we do these types of variances, if we want to think about maybe restricting the line of sight as far as landscaping goes in the area between the fence and the sidewalk. Just a thought.
Yeah, what he said. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Not, the motion was made and seconded to direct the village attorney to prepare an ordinance granting approval of a variance as identified at 12549 South Wingstem Street. Trustee O'Rourke?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 12443 South Route 59, Unit 102. We're seeking board consideration of a motion to adopt the findings of fact of the Plan Commission as the findings of fact of the Board of Trustees, and furthermore, to direct the village attorney to prepare an ordinance granting approval of the special use for the beauty/nail salon and body art service known as European Beauty Lounge LLC at 12443 South Route 59, Unit 102.
So moved.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Are there any comments or questions on this item?
I guess I just have to make a comment, I guess. So in the staff report, there was an item called microblading. Is that correct? So I had to actually look that one up, so I don't know. if you want to describe what that actually is for people, or if you want me to.
So I think my interpretation would be that it's consistent with like a body art and/or a salon. It's not a tattooing technique, but a permanent ink or a semi-permanent ink technique to apply
For the eyebrows,
yeah,
I believe,
eyebrows
right?
or,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
certain features. So
Seems very, looking it up, it seems pretty popular. So I'm guessing it's regulated kind of along with the state with tattoos and those other things as well, correct?
we do have some establishments in the village that currently provide this personal
okay.
service as well.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? The motion was made and seconded to direct the village attorney to prepare an ordinance granting approval of the special use as identified at 1-2443 South Route 59, Unit 102. Trustee O'Rourke?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Liam?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 23904 West Main Street. We're seeking board consideration of a motion to adopt the findings of fact of the Plan Commission as the findings of fact of the Board of Trustees, and furthermore, to direct the village attorney to prepare an ordinance granting approval of a special use for two-family residential at 23904 West Main Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any comments or questions on this item?
I'd like to make a comment. The report also indicated that as this goes through, they're going to improve the property. That would be a wonderful thing, because that would be such a good thing for that busy corner to have this building repaired and fixed. So I'm all in favor of it.
I have a question, and I apologize, I read some of this a little bit later, but, so it talks about B3 special use, but if I look, I think at the zoning code, and you look under B3, it doesn't indicate special use for multifamily under B3, it's under B5, I believe. So has that changed, or am I
So
reading it wrong, or?
Procedurally, the applicant is requesting a special use for a planned development, and the planned development would specifically allow for a two-unit residential property here. It was up until, I believe, March of 2016, used for a two-unit residential, and it was a non-conforming use. Because that non-conforming use didn't continue within a 6-month period, it became prohibited at that point.
Right, I'm sorry, so,
So you're correct. It's not this isn't a standard special use request that, as the previous case was, a salon in the B3 zoning district would be a special use permit. This is specifically
So
would
what
be
is-
permitted as a planned development.
is that the way it went through the planning and zoning?
I think that's the intention.
I read the report, I don't know that I came across, and maybe I missed the plan development piece of it. It talks about the B3 zoning with an R1 overlay, and then I look up B3 and it doesn't say special use, it's a B5 that would need a special use, it doesn't talk about a plan development. Now, maybe it was a procedural error, I don't know, but I guess my bigger concern is I think the intent and the comprehensive plan indicates that area should be commercial, correct?
Right. That's staff directed the applicant in this direction as opposed to rezoning to R1. You know, staff feels that the B3 zoning is appropriate. It is consistent with the future land use designation in the comprehensive plan. So this plan development approach would allow for the residential use as a interim, or it could be permanent, but it allows for the residential use without removing the potential, the commercial potential, either now or in the future. So staff felt that that was a reasonable alternative or compromise to allow the residential use, which up until less than a year ago had been present on the property, while still maintaining the commercial zoning consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I'm just concerned maybe that it went through under the wrong heading, that's all.
Well, the discussion at the Plan Commission, I thought, was excellent. I want to commend both staff and the Plan Commission again for these last two, because they were heard on Tuesday, but now on the agenda to be passed tonight, which I think is excellent. Responsiveness to the residents' needs. But the homeowner came in and said, look, as you said already, it was already two families. They lost it because it was vacant for a while. We're only putting it back there. But the other thing she said, the owner, that she'd be very receptive if we wanted to redevelop that whole area into commercial. She'd be happy to cooperate with that. So I think we're on the right track. Fits into the comprehensive plan. Meanwhile, we get something, as Trustee Benucci said, a whole lot better than we have right now. And so I think it's a real plus for both the homeowner and for us. So I think it's an excellent move for us to do this.
So what is, I'm just curious what it means when the applicant says they'll cooperate with us in the future. If they have leases on the property, they're somewhat restricted and
No, it's an intention. And she's figures if it goes commercial, she can make some money on that too, and she'd be happy to move her daughter and the renter to another piece of property. She's, you know, and just looks at it from a business point of view, and I think it made good sense. She's trying to do something right now that'll help. It'll last for several years, and then it may go to something else which we have more value for, commercial perhaps, redevelop that whole little area. And she's not. She said she would not stand in the way of doing that. Can you hold her to it? No. I think Jonathan said, you know, it may be permanent if she wants to hold on to it, but her inclination at the moment is not to hold on to it if there's something better for town. She's a Plainfield resident, been here for some time, I understand, and she looks at the town as a whole, how they would benefit from it. So I was impressed. I thought it was a very good session from both her part and the Plan Commission and staff. I think staff did a nice job on that one too.
It's an improvement.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments or questions? Not. The motion was made and seconded to direct the village attorney to prepare an ordinance granting approval of the special use for two-family residential at 23904 West Main Street. Trustee O'Rourke.
no.
Trustee Peck.
Yes.
Trustee Benucci.
Yes.
Trustee Lamb.
Yes.
Mayor Collins.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Administrators report.
None tonight.
Management Services report.
No report.
Engineers report.
No report?
Planning Department report.
No report?
Building Department report.
No report.
Public Works report.
Good evening. Before you tonight is a engineering service agreement for the Indian Boundary Bridge. Back in May of, early part of 2015 in May, staff had submitted a letter to IDOT requesting that the bridge structure be considered for a rehabilitation project, grant funding. And to that end, we had gotten a letter agreeing to that process, so staff then went to work putting together an RFQ to solicit proposals from engineering firms for this work. We received approximately 13 proposals from different firms. We had gone through a process of ranking those submittals and got down to a field of 3. When we got to that stage, we then brought those 3 firms in for an interview to express how they would manage and design the project. After we went through that process, Strand Engineering was the most qualified firm to do this project. And with that, we have them in this evening to talk about the way they're going to address Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the design work for Indian Boundary Bridge. With that, we have Mark Rigas from Strand, and I'll turn it over to Mark, and he'll go through the process in which they got to this point.
Well, can you all hear me? Good, great. Well, good evening, Village Board, staff, and public that are present here. My name is Mark Rigas. I am with Strand Associates, a consulting engineering company. If you're not familiar with Strand, a few years ago we did the Lockport Street bypass study for the village. But tonight, I'm here to present to you the Indian Boundary Structure Project. And I wanted to point out that this project is going to be heavily funded with federal STP bridge funds. And I know you, the village has done these types of projects in the past. For this type of project, it's an 80-20 split. For every dollar that is spent, 80% of it is federal dollars and 20% is then village dollars for the project. So the village and Strand must accomplish the following for the project. Develop a strong case to IDOT to replace rather than rehabilitate the structure. Maximize touchdown limits both along Indian Boundary Road and Spring Hole Creek. Deliver a design that satisfies village and community concerns. And development of public involvement plan and consistent follow-through builds a trust with the stakeholders. So just to orientate yourself where the project exactly is, it's along Indian Boundary Road between two residential subdivisions. I believe it's Creekside Crossing to the south and Whispering Creek to the north right here. And you can see the roadway right here. It's a rural cross section. It does appear to be failing on you. And these are the structure we're talking about right here is two dual culvert pipes. They're CMP metal pipes that we'll be looking to replace. So Strand's committed team offers long-term loyalty and responsiveness in delivering on initiatives for the project. As I introduce you, I will be the project manager. Below me, I'll be working with Anthony Standish from our office. He's a registered structural engineer within the office. We do have some other members that will be working with us as a team. And we do have several sub-consultants that we're proposing, mostly for potential land acquisition needs for the village and for geotechnical engineering. So building convincing case for replacement ultimately satisfies funding requirements. This is a screenshot right here of your structure summary report. So this structure right now has a sufficiency rating of 60.7. And if you take a look at the requirements, IDOT indicates that the structure would be eligible for rehabilitation if it has a rating between 50 and 80. And if it has 50 or less, it is eligible for replacement. And like I said, we're going to be pushing for replacing the structure, even though that the structure rating is 60.7. So early discussions with IDOT's local project manager offers confidence that replacement will be funded if it's the most cost-effective solution. So I'm kind of looking, showing you here two very simple equations of if we do in-kind replacement rehabilitation versus replacement, and that's just keeping the same length of the structure and culverts as it allows the creek to pass underneath. And you'll kind of see from a construction perspective, you do a project like this for in-kind replacement, approximately 60 to 65% of the replacement cost would be rehabilitation. However, if there's a widening situation for the roadway or lengthening of the culverts, you kind of see that it's kind of a wash if you were going to rehabilitate the structure versus replace it entirely. So that's what we're gearing for in this project, is taking a look at the widening and getting replacement of the actual structure for the village. So Strand's previous project example sets precedence for structure replacement. So I'm just showing you here two projects that we recently completed that with STP bridge projects. The one up here in the upper left-hand corner was for West Chicago. It had a sufficiency rating of 62, so you can see it was not below 50. However, we were able to work with IDOT to get the structure replaced. Second example right here is a project we did for Stevenson County. Again, the culverts that you see right here had a sufficiency rating of 55, which was above the 50. However, we were able to work with IDOT and show that the structure it's more cost effective to replace the structure rather than to rehabilitate it. So maximizing touchdown limits improves overall corridor with minimum village cost. Touchdown limits, I know you guys are talking football tonight with the national championship game. But when I'm talking touchdown limits, I am talking about what is the limits of the reconstruction of the roadway when we are replacing the culvert. And that's going to be very key in this project and what we need to do to maximize the limits of our touchdown and reconstruction. As you can see here, there's a subdivision to the north, which has an urban cross section with curb and gutter and a wider roadway. And to the south, again, you have a subdivision roadway, curb and gutter, and a wider roadway. So you have about 800 feet in between right here where you have a skinnier roadway with roadside ditches that is about 22 feet of pavement. And what we're going to be doing is kind of taking a look to see how we can link these two subdivisions together with a consistent, typical section of the roadway as you go throughout. So specific attention to roadway and hydraulic functionality promotes expansion of the project limits. So one of the things we're going to be taking a look at, this is actually a photo upstream that we received from a resident. You can see flooding right here, almost overtopping the roadway. It's circled where there's kind of this swirling going on. And this is again upstream right here where you can see one of his structures in his backyards is being flooded right there. So with these types of projects, normally you see that the roadway does not have the type of freeboard with a 30-year flood, and you have to raise the roadway. And the higher we raise the roadway, the farther our touchdown and reconstruction limits are going to be to necessitate a further reconstruction of the project. And another thing that's going to necessitate the reconstruction is you do kind of have a substandard width of the roadway right there. There's just some general requirements for a roadway, and I have kind of strikes next to each one of these because you're not meeting these requirements with your roadway at this point. So that is kind of adding fuel to being able to widen the roadway and get your touchdown limits and reconstruction limits further out so you can kind of link those two subdivisions. So showcasing long-term bridge function and scour protection supports inclusion of the Streambank stabilization. If you look at the upper left-hand corner right here, you can see that's the Springhole Creek. If looking downstream, there's higher velocities you're seeing, and you're seeing erosion of the Streambank right there. And what we'd be looking to do is to include the Streambank stabilization within the project limits so you get that 80-20 split associated with that. And these are just two examples of how we have stabilized creeks and streams for previous clients. So moving on to the corridor understanding prompts design delivery that satisfies the village and community concerns. Throughout the project, we want to take a look at pedestrian connectivity for the project, the investment value that the village is placing into this, designing something that has low maintenance for the village, possibly aesthetic enhancements, limit environmental impacts, and enhancing safety for the project. So pedestrian accommodations within maximum project limits promotes connectivity and safety. So you can take a look here at the south end and the north ends. You have existing sidewalk, and the blue line kind of represents where we want to connect the sidewalk to the subdivisions and provide that connectivity for the pedestrians. Consideration of right-of-way and constructability and design limits, disruption to property owners and users. So what we want to take a look at, again, is minimizing the right-of-way impacts to private property owners, as you can see here on the upper left-hand corner. Down here, we want to avoid delays with utilities, identify these utility conflicts, get them out of the way before the village's contractor is out there to avoid any delays. And up right here in the upper right-hand corner, we want to take a look at using precast structure products for that, because the precast products, they are easier to construct. It speeds up your construction. For a project like this, if you're replacing the culvert, it's going to require you to close down the roadway, and there would be a short detour associated with that. So we want to get construction done as soon as possible for the residents. Attention to design details results in a safe, low-maintenance structure. So one of the things we want to take a look at is potentially having a single-span structure. Right now you see a single-span structure in this kind of cartoon figure we have, and your two existing culverts. And when you have two culverts, you tend to have type of a buildup right here. That's a maintenance issue with debris that may be within the creek on the upstream end. We also want to take a look at elimination of the guardrail that is actually at the culvert. A guardrail in itself is a hazard. So we want to take a look at if we can extend the culverts and get the ends of the culverts that are hazards to vehicles outside of the limits where guardrail would be necessitated for the project. Of course, we want to take a look at ADA compliance for the project with your existing sidewalks and a sustainable stream bank stabilization, as you're seeing with the erosion on the downstream end of the project. So the refined approach and contained project results in a minimized project timeline and cost-effective engineering. This is very rough schedule for the engineering of the project. As you can see in 2015 and 2016, the village was coordinating with IDOT in order to get these funds and release an RFQ for this project. But for phase one engineering, that is the planning of the engineering. We're looking at a 9 to 12 month span to complete the phase one engineering. Phase two is approximately the same for the design of the project, 9 to 12 months. And phase three, we'd like to hit it within the middle of the construction season, preferably in the summer when you're going to see lower water levels and it's dry, because it's going to be easier for the contractor to deal with the creek associated with that. Development of public involvement plan and consistent follow-through builds trust with the stakeholders. So some of the things we want to do for this project is we are going to be releasing project initiation letters with questionnaires attached to that. We'll send these letters out to the stakeholders, and we want to ask for their feedback concerning the corridor and the creek, potential issues that they've been experiencing in the past, so we can kind of address those issues. We'd also like to have at least one public open house that we're going to be accepting public comments, something like this that you see right here, where people can see what the actual project corridor is. Village board presentations, as I am here with you tonight. Individual stakeholder meetings, if that's going to be necessary. And support data for the village project for a specific website if you want to be updating the public as we move forward with the project. So at that, I will open it up to any questions that you guys may have.
No question, just a very comprehensive proposal you put together, and obviously there's a whole lot more beyond that. You have a lot of background and experience in these kinds of projects, and I think we can benefit from that. So I understand, usually we do things on low bid. I'm not sure this is low bid, but words were most qualified, and I can understand from your presentation why the qualification is there. It's very important to us.
Yes, because of the federal funding, it had to go through the QBS process, so that is the process that they followed, the village.
It was a great presentation. I may have some follow-up questions that I'll funnel through village staff
Okay.
To get those answered, but thank you very much for coming tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we're very excited to work with the village. Again, it's been a few years since we've worked with you, so very excited about it.
You mentioned connectivity. Is there any chance, or I know it's early in looking at this, but adding a sidewalk on the side of this, or what is ultimately your plan, do you know, going in?
Yeah, that's one of the things we'll be taking a look at is not only widening the roadway, having a consistent cross-section between the two north and south subdivision, widen the roadway, curb and gutter, and then I showed aerial figure with a blue line. We want to provide that sidewalk connection, because when we add the sidewalk and we add the widened roadway that meets requirements, what we're doing is we're requiring a longer culvert there that's kind of defaulting us into something that if we rehab the structure, do structural lining, and then we extend onto it, it's basically going to be the same cost as replacing the structure. And of course, the village wants a new structure. There's lower maintenance. It's going to have a longer service life than the existing culverts that are out there right now.
And you mentioned the elimination of guardrails.
Yes.
So I'm not an engineer, so how do you keep cars from falling into the creek?
Well, when you're putting in guardrail, you are protecting the vehicles from a known hazard. So right now what you have out there is you have a skinny roadway, and the guardrail is about 3 to 4 feet off of there, and there's just a drop off from the culvert. And that's protecting from the vehicles from that drop off that I believe is around 8 feet. For projects like this, what we do is we take a look at extending the culverts to see if that drop off is outside what they call the clear zone, where guardrail would not be necessitated. So you may have a, beyond the edge of the shoulder of the roadway, you have 10, 20 feet where it's enough of a recoverable zone for a vehicle where they wouldn't drop off into the ends of the culvert. So that's what we're talking about and looking at the safety of it, because like I said, guardrail in itself is a hazard. When a car hits it, it stops. So.
And keep in mind, just to add as well, the intent and I think what we're going to find in the design is that this street warrants more of a profile that we would see in the village, i.e. Curb and gutter, storm sewer, potentially street lighting too as well. Because if you look at this, this is kind of a rural gap in between actually 3 developed subdivisions that meet all the village's standards. So ultimately through the design, I don't want to move too far forward, but I think you're going to find that this will warrant curb and gutter, storm sewer, kind of take care of those things to, alleviate stray vehicles as well.
On that description kind of helps, because then you think a curb, somebody's going to hit the curb before they, and then there's going to be space after it to recover and everything else before they end up going over the edge, I guess you'd say. So thank you for that. The one question I think for you, Alan, is I know in the past we had talked about looking at and maybe it was, I don't know if it was this one or something, but there was, I think, a cost associated with replacing a culvert that we were talking about deferring to try to save money towards pushing it into the following year. Was that part of this project or no?
This currently is in the budget, this year's budget for design. But as you can see, the detail in the contract and just working with the state and federal government, there are a lot of hoops to jump through to get to the point where we're ready for construction. So I don't think that funding and timing of funding is going to be an issue, because this is going to be a multi-year project. But the benefit is as Mark has stated, we're going to have the opportunity to have a lot of community involvement, interaction, and stakeholder support in this too as well.
Okay, but is this, because you remember the one we talked, I think, about hoist delaying maybe there was some capital projects that we had on a list, and we said, oh, we would give up this one, give up that one, give up this one, and from what I remember, one of them was a bridge, and it wasn't $1 million. I know it was like maybe it's 145,000, so it might have been like phase 1 or phase 2 design of that bridge. Was that the one we talked about postponing or putting off this bridge or not?
We tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the budget, and there is MFT within the budget too as well. But I think the deeper discussion occurs 2 weeks from now at the committee of the whole, when we're going to talk about capital as a whole, and we're going to talk about all those projects that we had talked about before, and just, you know, put a little bug in your ear to think about. We had talked about the area around the Village Green as far as capital improvements, both water and sewer first, and then roadway improvements. Mary Brook we had talked about a little bit. And then we'll also have the IMS data at that time to talk about the conditions of the roadway. So I think the meat of that discussion is 2 weeks from now, and we'll be happy. If you have questions before that, definitely forward that to us. Staff will bring that forward in 2 weeks at the committee of the whole.
So based upon that, are we having this vote early, or should we wait for the conversation in 2 weeks?
This is already in the budget, and it's a
Okay.
4-year project. I
So
would
it was probably not the one I was thinking of then. Okay, thank you.
I'm trying to remember the project that you're talking about, Ed, and you're
But you
right.
remember the meeting?
I do, and I remember the hoist, and I have to refresh my memory. But good question. We'll follow up on that.
I agree.
Are there any other comments or questions? Not, we're seeking board consideration of a motion to approve the engineering service agreement for the Phase 1 and 2 engineering work for the Indian Boundary Bridge Replacement Project, and authorize the village president to sign said agreement with Strand Associates in an amount not to exceed $275,000.
So moved.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Trustee O'Rourke?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Police Chief's report.
Thank you. I just have one item tonight. I'm seeking board's consideration to adopt an ordinance authorizing the sale of personal property, specifically 2 vehicles we have in the police department that have in excess of 100,000 miles on them, increased maintenance costs, and usability. They're not even usable for PEMA, as we always try to move those cars to PEMA if possible. So I am seeking board's authorization to adopt an ordinance authorizing the sale of these 2 vehicles.
So move.
Second.
Questions? Does this require, I noticed the write-up says 3/4 of the community approves it. That means we have to have 5 of the 6, or we have 4 or 5 tonight, or how many votes do we have to pass this?
Well, normally you would need 4 trustees, because that would be 4 of 6.
4 or 6 is 2/3.
Right.
It said 3/4, I was just.
Let me take a look at the ordinance.
I don't think we have an issue. I just want to make sure before we vote.
Yeah, but this is 3/4 of the corporate authorities.
Or what's that?
So the corporate authorities is all of you, including the mayor.
Right, so I
So-
mean, we have 5 of us here, therefore we need 4 to pass it, including the mayor, because you only have the
Yeah.
5.
So everybody votes for it it's
Maybe
adopted.
no issue, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
before we vote, I want to make sure we understood what a no vote might mean. One no vote doesn't change
Yeah,
anything.
I had thought you were talking about the provision in terms of the trustees, but this is the 3/4 of the corporate authorities, now that I read section
I haven't
7.
seen that very often, so that's.
No, it's an unusual, it's one of the few things that requires a supermajority of 3/4 of the corporate authorities. Because for instance, annexation agreements are 2/3 and, so.
Okay,
Yeah, good
thank you,
question.
that's fine.
Everybody.
The motion was made and seconded to adopt ordinance number 3293, authorizing the sale of personal property. Trustee O'Rourke?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes,
Thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Attorney's report.
No report, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 2017-2018 proposed budget discussion.
Thank you. What you have in your packet tonight is what is considered, what we consider miscellaneous funds, although they're not very miscellaneous. We just have them in that portion of our budget document. It's a draft for next fiscal year. There's, since they're pretty brief, I'd like to just flip through them, and if you have questions along the way, I'd be happy to answer them, if that's okay. So if we start with page 2. Page 1 is just the summary of all the funds we'll be discussing, but I'm just going to jump to page 2 and start speaking to each fund specifically. Page 2 is our motor fuel tax fund. Motor fuel tax is, as we've discussed in the capital portion of our discussions so far, the village board has directed to implement $2 million towards maintenance and upkeep of the village's roadways networks. $1 million comes from MFT. That's the direction that we've, the policy direction that we've continued in the last few years. That is the proposed budget for fiscal 18, is to continue that $1 million towards the street improvements. The details of what roads will be improved will continue in the capital discussion. This is a placeholder for tonight to show and reflect that that $1 million is going to be budgeted and spent on the roadway improvements within the village. But again, when we speak to the capital fund in a couple weeks, Alan and his staff will speak to those roadway networks along with the pavement condition index and which roadways we'll be looking at that point in time. If you look at the revenue side, we are trending a little lower this fiscal year on MFT allotments. There are no delays in our funding as far as I can see so far this fiscal year. We're just receiving slightly less than what we've anticipated. Not of grave concern. Just wanted to point it out on our revenue projections as well. You'll also notice on the expense side, we've typically budgeted a transfer to our general fund. And if you go back to a few past years before 2014 fiscal year, the reason why the transfers are a placeholder within the budget is if we have those snow events and we have high salt purchase years, we've enabled this transfer and moved it to general fund to help offset that cost. Salt purchases is expended within our corporate fund. And we can utilize motor fuel tax dollars for that purpose. We can also utilize it for electricity within our street lighting expenses that we have. So staff has taken the approach, and it's been a historical perspective, that we've placed in the last couple of years it's been $200,000. Actually, this year we're looking to propose $150,000 as a placeholder to transfer to general fund in the event that there's an event, snow event, which I hate to say right now, of any kind that requires additional funding for our corporate fund to help offset some of the costs that we might see. If you go back maybe 8 years, we've had some of those events where we've had high salt purchase prices, a lot of additional contractual costs for snow removal, and that's why that expenditure is there. Usually, like you've seen in the last 3 fiscal years, we have not needed to transfer those funds. However, they've been placed in there on a budget purpose just in case. So if the board has any
Just ask a
questions.
question on the revenue side.
Mhm.
The motor fuel tax is per capita based?
Yeah.
It comes from the state. It's nothing to do with the actual use within the town.
Right, the local motor fuel tax is within our corporate revenues. The cent per gallon, the 4 cents per gallon, that goes right into our general fund for street maintenance and street improvements, right?
And it's a calculation that the state utilizes based on the number of gallons that are sold throughout the state and your population. So if people statewide buy fewer gallons total, then the amount reduces, or if your population declines, which is not our case, we've always increased in size and population, then that can offset the number too as well.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that. 'cause
Sure.
Some confusion earlier, so.
I had a question. You'd started with $2 million typically on roadway improvements or maintenance stuff, and this is basically $1 million. So where does the other $1 million fall into?
That comes from the capital fund, Fund 11, and where all the other capital projects are. We'll take $1 million from there and $1 million from here.
Okay, so, and then where it's described capital down below, that's from the motor fuel, that's not from the capital account, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then that,
these projects are specific, there's a lot of restrictions, I shouldn't say restrictions, but rules that have to be followed through MFT in order to utilize these funds. So when Alan and his staff recommend projects to be used through MFT, there's usually a specific reason why what we're using those $1 million for. So he can speak to that when we get to, a little bit more discussion of the capital program as a global perspective.
and that's where maybe the capital or the expenditures will adjust based upon that street study we did, whether we need to accelerate that maybe or continue as been going. Okay, thank you.
Correct. Pages 3 and 4 is the village's bond and interest fund. Page 3 just represents the revenue streams that come into this fund. Primarily, this fund takes in property tax revenue for one of our debt issues. If the village recalls back when we were talking about a property tax levy, there is a component for property tax revenue based on one of the bonds that we have. That bond will be paid off in fiscal year 20. December of 2019, I believe, is the last payment that is made for this particular debt that we have. The other two revenue streams are transfers directly from our water and sewer fund and from Fund 11, which is our capital fund. And those are the only three components of revenue, other than some residual interest that we're seeing within this fund. And page 4 represents the debt series that are being paid from this fund.
So I'm sorry, I'm not an accountant. So on page 4, it talks about principal and interest, and typically when I think you're paying off debt, your principal and interest at some point is going to get lower each year, but it looks like next year it's actually going up. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, and when we issue debt or refund debt or retire debt, that's all looked in a global perspective, along with Baird, who helps us along when we issue any debt. We have a level debt service across the village, so our debt payments, and as you can see, other than 15 when we refunded, we have level debt service payments from fiscal year to fiscal year. So the typical principal and interest reduction isn't necessarily the case when you get into the end of your life cycle of a typical loan that you would have. It's structured a little differently within the bonds itself.
And then the reason it could be going up slightly is just for budget reasons?
It could be based on the timing and the maturities that were happening within that particular year. It just depends on when the debt was issued and what we had on the books at the time as well.
Thank you.
Page 5 and 6 are, just page 5, apologize, is our Tort Immunity Fund. This is the village's insurance fund, whereas we fund for our liability, property and casualty, and workers' comp insurance. This is the village is a part of SWARM, which is the it's a pooled risk management group with 9 other municipalities. So the village benefits from having a broker that services multiple municipalities. We also share the risk and rewards of insurance, which has been a good thing for the village. The revenues from this particular fund to fund the village's liability and property and casualty and workers' comp insurance comes from property tax revenue. Again, if the board recalls, during the tax levy process, $625,000 was listed as revenue for Tort Immunity Fund, which is what's listed on page 5 here as a revenue source. If you look back at the history of this particular fund, you'll see that this fund has increased from just under $400,000 to up to that $625,000 in projected revenue for next year. And if you move your eyes down to the bottom, you'll notice that there was a deficiency in fiscal 14, and currently we're sitting at a zero balance as far as the debits and credits or ins and outs. And what happened is, and it goes back to 2012, there was a fund balance sitting within our Tort Immunity Fund, and in 2012 there was a challenge within our corporate fund as far as funding. we were actually taking fund balance from tort immunity. Tort immunity can only be used for insurance purposes. When you levy a tax for this purpose, it cannot be spent for any other purpose within the village. So back in 2012, when we had some economic challenges, this particular fund had residual fund balance within it. And so when we levied for this particular purpose, we did not need to levy as much because there are already funds within tort immunity. But where I'm trying to get at is we've gotten to a point where our fund balance is pretty flat. There's no residual funds within tort immunity. So our expenses, if you look along the bottom line, we've been spending from $517,000 up to a projected $625,000 this fiscal year's proposed. So relatively flat, slightly higher, not too much of an increase, but on the revenue side, it's gone up a couple $100,000, and it's primarily because we've had funds within this particular fund to pay for those services. So I just wanted to point that out as we're talking through tax levy and revenue streams. This is something that's going to be pretty consistent moving forward. I don't necessarily anticipate going back to a $395,000 revenue request for from a tax levy perspective.
Tracy, I'm glad you brought that up. This was one of the concerns that I had when we were looking at the levy, and there was discussion whether we should leave the levy exactly the same or if we should actually lower the percentage. And what this board was able to do was not raise taxes, leave the levy the same, and we were able to lower the water rate, okay, which didn't sum up to a lot per home, but it was something. And, you know, like any organization, as time moves on, it costs more money to operate, okay? And this is a prime example. We're looking at $225,000 approximately, correct? A difference.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The good news for us when we were having economic challenges, we were able to levy less for this fund, so our corporate fund was able to take some of the additional burdens that we were having at the time from a funding perspective and utilize the fact that we didn't need to levy as much for tort immunity that year. So it was a help back then, but just going forward, just understand that, you know, our expenses on our insurance probably won't reduce to the $400,000 cost. It'll probably remain relatively flat or slightly higher based on experience.
This is pretty consistent with what you see with other municipalities. I mean, I know you said 517 to 625, that's $100,000 over, I guess it's 3 or 4 years, so that's a pretty good increase, I think, and that's just because of the cost of insurance is.
Cost of insurance, this is a very specialized market nowadays. A lot of the insurance and companies are out of the municipal markets. In addition to that, on workers' comp side, when you add more staff, it does become a little bit more of a liability cost because you have to insure those additional employees. We haven't added a tremendous amount of staff, but that comes into play when you start calculating some of the costs as well.
I have a quick request for staff. Can staff, in maybe 30 seconds or less, quickly summarize the changes that we made from a policy standpoint as far as employees' contribution toward health insurance since we've been in office since '09?
Well, what we have in place is, depends on the, well, again, tort immunity is for our liability
I know
insurance.
it's separate. It's not this
not
line
our
item, but
healthcare
it's
insurance, yeah.
out of the corporate fund is my point.
Sure, absolutely. It depends on the level of insurance that you get from us, but you know, there are 3 different choices you have as an employee. You can either have a HMO, PPO2, or PPO1. On the PPO1, the employee pays 18% of that cost. The PPO2 and the HMO, that cost is borne at 13%.
And how did that change previous to the 2009 Ford administration?
We implemented at one point, and I look at Alan because he's a little longer term. At one point, the employees were not paying towards the health insurance costs, and it's been in my tenure here that was implemented. The percentage contributions implemented. You might remember the year. I don't remember the year as much, but no, it was probably 8 or 10. But and when we just recently did the survey through our class plan, the village came across as competitive through the market as far as what our employees are contributing. They're actually contributing slightly higher than some other communities.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
There's no other questions on tort. Be happy to move along. Audit fund. This is where we pay our village's annual audit. This year, you'll see a proposal come back. Sikich has been our auditor for a number of years. They've they're on their 5th year of their current contract. They have an option to extend 3 years, but staff is bringing a proposal back to get quotes, and you will see that proposal come forward within the next month or two for the current fiscal year audit is up. So the staff is comfortable with the proposed budget, and the property tax revenue does, we do levy a property tax for audit fund. And again, the fund balance from last fiscal year was just over $6,000. This fund can only be used for this purpose, and we try to keep this as flush as possible, but we're comfortable with the $42,000 proposed budget, anticipating actually more reasonable cost going out to bid one more time. Page 7 and page 8 represents the police pension fund. We've had some discussions in previous workshops regarding police pension, and the fact that our actuarial analysis is showing that the contribution from what we can call employer contributions is raised from 1.1 million to a recommended just under 1.4 million, 1.3.5 million. And you'll see that under the employer contributions. And that particular contribution is what we talked about through the levy process. That's what's within calculated within the rate of the village's tax levy. The employee contributions, they contribute 9.91% of their salary, and that's represented in that line as well. And on the top is really investment income relating to how their board and their fund has their investments and how they generate. So at this point, it's just a proposed dollar amount and based on some historical data as well as trending a little bit. On the second page, again, it represents the expenditures relating to pension payments. Staff is unaware at this point of any definite additional pensioners that we'll be needing to pay for next fiscal year, but there are a number of employees that are eligible. So at this point, we're going to leave the proposed budget at the recommended $485,000. If staff hears of any different directions from any of the employees, we'll revisit this and we can bring it back to the board. And if it's prior to approval, we'll make those updates and let you know that as well. All the other expenditures are related to the operations of the pension fund, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Tracy, do you know what happened in, when I'm looking at the unrealized gain or loss in 16? It looks like they took a pretty substantial hit. Do you know what that was?
Specifically, I don't know the nature of the loss that they took. I can get that information. We have the annual reports that can provide that detail for you.
I'd like to go back to 2014. That looks much better.
Mm-hmm. That was a better year. Page 9 is the DARE fund. This fund is supports the DARE program and its operations within the village, and that is contributions directly related to fundraising efforts that or donations that are given towards this program, and the expenditures reflect the same. Page 10 is the tax increment financing fund, which is the downtown TIF area. Right now, we're looking at looking through the. This is driven towards property tax revenue through the TIF. That's the general premise of the revenues that come through this fund, and some residual interest income that happens along the way. So next year, we're looking at roughly $745,000 in revenue. We're seeing a little downtick in the revenues that we've received to date, just under $700,000. I've got some queries in to find out, in fact, what's happening. But at this point, we're going to keep the proposed budget flat for next year. And then on the expenditure sides, you'll see contractual services is primarily where most of the expenditures are. It's refreshing. It's the continuation of the refreshing of downtown, and minimal facade improvements at this point that I'm aware of as far as any
Actually, it's the
facades.
construction of the parking lot off of Displain Street.
There you go. That's primarily
And
what's
there is as well some discussion about a water main extension off one of the alleys so that we could be able to better support fire suppression needs in the future.
And anything that moves forward contractually will obviously come for the board for approval at that point in time. These funds, again, cannot be used for any other source but for the TIF area. So as you can see, last fiscal year, there was about $800,000, almost $900,000 fund balance within this fund. It stays within this fund unless it's spent for that TIF purpose. You'll notice that there's a transfer to general fund, which is ongoing administration and maintenance and upkeep of the fund itself. So costs of attorneys or Brian's time or Alan's time, things of that nature to project manage or do some sort of work towards the TIF fund, the annual reports that my staff handles as well and files. That's that transfer. The capital fund transfer, staff is recommending a transfer to capital fund of $500,000, and that's the repayment for the streetscape improvements that was originally done back in 2007. That was not expended from TIF dollars at that point in time. It was expended through the capital fund.
I have a question under the sales, fixed assets under miscellaneous. Would the sale of the bocce building fall under that category or no?
Right, and that I'd have to check the details, and I can get that for you to make sure to give you the specifics of the dollar amount.
But I mean, normally would that dollar amount fall under that line item?
Yeah, it should. Mm-hmm.
Is that what that 72 is, or is that?
That should be the net difference between when it was purchased and when it was sold. But I can get you those details for sure.
And lastly, so what happens when this expires? If there's a balance, can we continue to use those funds, or do we have to refund them, or how does that work?
The answer is yes, it needs to get refunded. If there are any funds left over at the end of the life of the TIF, then the balance gets returned to those agencies based on what their percentage contribution is.
That 2021 is when this expires?
Yeah.
Expires in 2021. Yep.
So internally, staff's been talking about ongoing conversations as far as we get closer to that date. We anticipate we'll bring forward some of that discussion to the board, more than likely next fiscal year, as far as we're getting through the downtown refresh portion. The facades are getting pretty much finalized. I think that's a good opportunity next fiscal year to start talking about the next 2 years and what it looks like and what needs to be done proactively before that TIF expires. And if there's any projects that staff needs to look at prior to that time, in case there's something that we haven't seen on the radar itself.
Be a big change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be a very big change. The question as well is going to be for the businesses downtown. We need to have a conversation with the business owners downtown as well, because we've used the TIF funds as a way to provide additional services to those businesses that aren't necessarily provided to businesses that are on Route 59 or Route 30, for example, snow plowing services and the like. So we have to have a different kind of discussion with the business owners, how to go forward with, business improvement district or whatever it might very well be for those additional services that get provided. So
It's usually like some kind of a merchants association or something, isn't it? A lot of communities, that's how they provide those extra resources, I believe, right?
right, you can do it through an informal merchants association, absolutely, or you can do it through having a formal business improvement district, or essentially it's a CAM charge of some sort or another. Yeah.
And then the last page is our alcohol enforcement fund, and the revenues derived from this fund is directly related to alcohol fines through the police department, and the funding's transferred to our corporate fund to help offset the police enforcement costs within our corporate fund. And that's the extent of our what we consider miscellaneous funds. These will be brought back to the board as part of the whole package of the budget as we move forward through the budget process. The next workshop, we're looking to look at capital and possibly the rest of our general fund, depending on the time frame that we have for our next workshop meeting. Otherwise, we may look at that as the 31st date.
Correct. We'll take a look at to see how much is to be presented at the next committee of the whole, and we'd like to reserve that fifth Monday just in case we need it for further discussions. And now Michelle can be mad at me.
I know we had spoken at the last capital meeting we had about getting kind of an idea of projects that are already committed. So in other words, we approved phase 1, so obviously we have to go forward with phase 2. Is it possible maybe to get that before the discussion, the meeting discussion, so we can have time to kind of review it? And
Yeah, I think that that's something that I'm looking to Alan to see that we can fit that in. I think that's
thank you.
something we can do, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Pleckham. That was a great presentation.
Reminders.
January 11th is coffee with the mayor. The 12th is historic preservation. 16th, our offices were closed. January 17th is planning commission. The 23rd is our next committee of the whole. Our next village board meeting will be February 6th.
Seeking a motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry, can I have one question? So I thought there was conversation, and I didn't know if it had been decided about adding an extra meeting this month.
Yeah, that's what I was speaking to, is we
Has
will
it been decided?
hasn't been decided yet. We're
thank
going to take a look at staff to see how the 23rd is shaping up. And we're just asking that you hold that as available, and as we start setting that together, we might take advantage of that extra day.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.